The EU wants the power to restrict UK access to the single market and impose tariffs if the Brussels Commission deems Britain to have broken aspects of a transitional agreement, which of course is yet to be agreed. It wants the ability to do this quickly without recourse to the ECJ. That's according to official papers that were leaked to the media last night and published today. As you can imagine, Tory Brexiteers aren't too impressed. Jacob Rees-Mogg called the EU's position aggressive. Later today, Theresa May will chair the first of two meetings of her Brexit war cabinet, and this is just one more problem on her plate. Here's Ellie with all the details.
Thank you, Andrew. The European Union Exit and Trade Strategy and Negotiations Subcommittee, or to give it its more exciting name, the War Cabinet, is chaired by the Prime Minister and consists of 10 senior ministers. Today they will discuss Northern Ireland and immigration in the first of two crunch meetings. And tomorrow they'll move on to trade and the future partnership. So will we get any firm decisions on the UK position? Probably not. Today, the British Chamber of Commerce has written to the Prime Minister calling for more clarity, urging ministers to deliver a clear, unequivocal statement of intent on Brexit. And this morning, the EU has published a draft section of the final withdrawal agreement, saying that there should be a mechanism for allowing the EU to suspend certain benefits of single market membership during the transition period. The UK government has sought to play that down. This is a draft document, they say, produced by the EU that simply reflects the stated directives. Both sides are hoping to be able to reach agreement on the terms of the implementation or transition period by the time they meet at the European Council summit in March. Andrew.
Thanks, Ellie. What is the British government's position? Are we prepared to negotiate Britain on sanctions and punishments if we're deemed to have broken a transitional period?
Well, Andrew, I mean, this is a draft document. It's obviously going to be a negotiation about what the rules of the implementation period will be. What I would say is that Brussels have previously been quite clear that they don't want to punish Britain. And actually, very much in terms of the trade flows, you've got to remember it's very much in the EU's interest to keep trade flowing between the UK and the
Sure, I know all that. But the talk is that if they deem us to have broken any aspect of the transitional agreement, Brussels would have the power to ground British flights, to suspend access to the single market, and even impose tariffs on British goods. Well, are we prepared to negotiate on that basis?
Well, look, that'll be in terms of like the details of how the implementation period work is a subject to the negotiation. But on those specific points, you've got to remember that it's also in the European Union's interest to keep trade flowing and to keep flights between the EU and the UK. So why would they want to
Because they're saying
flights?
that if we agree to a transitional period, but they then deem that we've broken aspects of that, they want the power to have sanctions against us.
Yeah.
And these sanctions could include grounding flights in Britain or tariffs against certain manufacturers that have deemed to have broken the transitional arrangements. Now, I ask again, is the British government prepared to negotiate on that basis?
Look, we're going to sort out, there's going to be a negotiation of how the implementation period works. What I'm saying to you, it would be illogical for the European Union to want to ground flights between the EU and the UK. I'm working
it's
on the
in
basis.
the document. I've got the document here. This is it. They want to suspend certain benefits deriving from the UK's position in the internal market, where it considers referring to the market to the court wouldn't happen more quickly in time. It needs a mechanism for them to be able to respond. Let me try a third time. Are we prepared to negotiate on sanctions if we are deemed to have broken a transitional agreement?
This is a draft document. I'll be clear again that it would not be in the EU's interest to take some of these.
It's the negotiating document, Minister. That is the EU's position. So I will try and break my rule because I normally only go 3 times, but I'll try for a 4th time. What is the British government's negotiating position? Is it prepared to negotiate on this basis?
We will come to an agreement on the terms of the implementation period. That is what we will negotiate. We will not do anything that breaks the terms of the implementation period.
Will you accept sanctions from the Commission if we are deemed to have broken the deal?
That is going to be a matter for the negotiation, Andrew.
Oh, really? No, I never worked that out. I know what the EU's position is. I'm trying to get the British government's position. Mind you, trying on any issue is pretty much a lost cause these days. So let me try again. What is our negotiating position? Are we prepared to negotiate any kind of sanctions or not?
Look, we'll have to see how we're going to enter this negotiation. What I'm saying to you is that a lot of what is published there is illogical. Why would the EU want to ground flights where presumably half of the passengers are coming from the European?
So you'll be against it?
What I'm saying is that let's look at what we actually
So you're not against
for the implementation period.
Are you against it or are you not against it?
Look, I'm saying let's wait for that negotiation. It's not for me today to preempt a negotiation that hasn't
No,
even
but it
started.
is you as a member of the British government to tell this country what our negotiating position is as a country, and you are incapable of doing
Look,
that.
the negotiation hasn't started yet, Andrew. It is.
The EU has published its side. I'm asking a simple question on behalf of the British voter. What is our side?
It is a draft EU document, yeah? That's what
You've
I'm
said that 4 times. It's the negotiating document. It's the position paper on transitional arrangements in the withdrawal agreement. This is the document.
But negotiations, Andrew, we're going to negotiate about what the terms of the implementation period.
Would Labour agree to this?
Well, I mean, the problem we've got at the moment is the fact we haven't even agreed a transition period.
Yeah,
If we
but
think
would
of
Labour
that-
agree to this?
Well, obviously, we would have been in a far different position.
Yeah, but you're
because-
not. Would Labour agree to this?
Well, we clearly aren't because we're not in power at the moment. But our
No, but you
job
could
is
be
to
in
put-
power. There could be an election any day.
Well, we're absolutely ready for
your
that.
party's on an election war footing. Mr. Corbyn's told
We
us that
are.
many times.
Absolutely.
So if this falls to you to negotiate, which it easily could, would you agree to this or not?
Well, we wouldn't be in this position even talking about this document because we would
But
be in a
you would
completely
inherit. I'm
different
sorry.
place.
You would inherit this. Now the government won't answer, and you quite rightly constantly complain that it's hard to get a position out of the government.
completely.
We've seen that this morning. But I'm asking you, as the alternative government to this country, what would your position be when faced with this negotiating demand?
Well, I've been absolutely clear that we wouldn't even be discussing this document because we've been very clear on what we look to a future, which is very different from the position of the government, which, quite frankly, is in complete chaos.
Well, you think
over
that
its
if there
future.
was a Labour government, this document would be withdrawn?
We'd be in a very different
Why?
negotiating period. First of all, we've been clear on our transition agreements, that we will stay within the single market and customs union for the time being. We're not messing around with the European Union. We've got a clear strategy of making sure there are clear, frictionless customs arrangements
right.
moving forward.
So what this document about is the transitional period. And by the way, the government says it will stay in the customs union too during transition.
Well, it
and
says
the
it's in,
single-
it's out, it's,
No, it says it will stay in the customs
doesn't it?
union.
Yeah.
Would you, as part of the transitional agreements that you say you've been very clear about,
Absolutely.
accept these sanctions?
Well, we will not be in that position of having to because we'll be so clear about our relationship with Europe.
No, I'm
about-
sorry. Whatever the relationship, you need transitional arrangements for them.
Absolutely,
And you
that's
need a
right.
dispute mechanism if someone's found in breach. This is the EU's suggested disputes mechanism. Do you accept it or don't you?
Well, clearly there needs to be sanctions on both sides of any agreement that moves forward. That is always the case in a
So
negotiation.
you would accept these sanctions?
But whether it's about those sanctions or about, obviously, the sanctions placed on the EU. But what we have been very clear about is the transition on the same terms as we're on now.
Well,
and therefore, the EU is very clear about where Labour stands on these issues.
Let's come on to the customs union then. It is, am I right, the government's position that during the transition we stay in the customs union?
Well, that is also going to be. We haven't yet negotiated the transition period.
No, but what's your position?
Our position is that we'll be leaving the customs union in the end state.
Right, I'm
position.
not asking about that, man. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you simply won't address any of the questions I'm asking you. I know that it is the government's position that we leave the customs union. Indeed, we'll even leave a customs union after the
correct.
transition. My question was quite clear, because my understanding was this was your government policy, that we would stay in the customs union during the transition period.
What we want, Andrew, is to be only one change throughout all of this, that businesses only have to prepare for one change in terms of their current trading relations with the European Union.
So are we in or out of the customs union during the transition period? Labour says it would stay in. What would you do?
Well, look, that'll be a matter for the negotiation, but we want the terms
No,
of
it's
trade.
not. No, I'm sorry. It's not a matter for the negotiation. I'm asking what your position will be going into the negotiation. Will it be your position that you will accept membership of the customs union during the transition?
OK, Andrew, that is a matter for the negotiation. I'm not going to tell you today what our starting position will be.
Why?
Before a negotiation that hasn't actually even
Why not?
started.
You're negotiating on behalf of the British people. We have a right to know.
The negotiation hasn't started yet. What I'm telling you is what the position is, and has been laid clear over the last year that we are leaving the single market and are leaving
No,
the
we
customs
know
union.
that afterwards. But are you telling me this morning, even at this stage, that I mean, I must confess I'm mistaken, because I thought it was government policy to stay in the customs union and the single market, like Labour, during the transition period. You're telling me this morning that that position has not yet been determined.
I'm telling you we want to preserve the same terms of trade during the implementation period as is currently in place today. In the end
so you
state,
will stay in the customs.
Leaving the customs.
I'm not asking about the end state for the moment, Minister. I'm asking about the transition period. Are you telling me that we will be in the customs union for the transition period, or are you not?
I am telling you, Andrew, that is a matter for a negotiation that hasn't yet started, yeah?
No. It's a matter for us to find out what the government's position is going into the negotiations.
Okay.
And at this late stage, you cannot even tell me that.
It's a negotiation that hasn't yet started.
Well, it can't start till you make up your mind what you want.
Well, no, it will start.
Well, what's the point of negotiating if you can't make up your mind?
No, that's not the case at all. It is the government's position in terms of the long-term position is clear. We want the implementation period to be on the same terms of trade as today. Yeah?
So is that a convoluted way of saying that you will stay in the customs union during the transition period?
No, it is a way of saying keeping the same terms of trade as today. Yeah?
Well, that's the customs union. That's what we have.
That is what your inference is, but we're
I'm
going
sorry,
into that
it's not my
negotiation.
inference. We're in the customs
We're going
union.
into that negotiation, Andrew.
Do you know what you're talking about? Do you have any idea what you're talking about?
I'm the International Trade Minister, yes.
That's what worries me.
Oh, right, OK.
This is your field, and you cannot give a simple answer to a simple question.
Because it's a process that hasn't started yet.
OK. Just one question on this. It's not clear there's a majority to come out of the customs union, even after the transition period in the Lords. How should Labour vote on that?
Well, clearly we've said absolutely clearly in the long term we'll stay with the same frictionless trade as we move forward, and therefore what we've been.
But do you want to stay in the customs union or not?
Well, we haven't
post the transition.
We haven't got hung up on names of institutions. What we've said is the terms which are absolutely vital.
So you can't answer
as we
either.
Move forward. Well,
if it comes that there are votes coming up in the House that could determine whether we stay in or leave the customs union, the government position after the transition is to leave. Correct. Will Labour vote to leave or to stay after the transition? What's your position?
We have taken nothing off the table because we agreed.
No, but what's your position?
Well, that's what I've said. We are taking nothing
two votes
off
leaving
the table.
Nothing off the table is not an answer to a question. What's your position? Do you think we should stay in the customs union after the transition period or not?
Well, what we have said very clearly is that we can.
You haven't said anything clearly.
Well, I have, because I've said everything is on the table because it's the
everything on the table is just a phrase. Is it Labour's position? Let me try one more time. Is it Labour's position that we should remain in the customs union after the transition period is over?
We have said we'll stay in a customs arrangements with the EU, making sure that we have frictionless trade, and it's the concepts of being able to trade freely, which is really important. This government has had
don't attack the government when you can't even. I've done enough of that.
Well, it's had 20 months to negotiate a transition period.
You don't get out of not answering a question by attacking the government. You have not answered it.
Andrew, there have been two votes.
Neither of you have answered it. So let's
just see what Labour did in those votes.